purpose of this lesson is to look at how to really read a Shakespearean scene well. As I've said before, when we read Shakespeare today, what a lot of students are most concerned with is just making sure they understand what each sentence means, what each line means. Now, we take that for granted in the books we read today. We understand, for the most part, what it literally says. Our main work is understanding the deeper meaning, the metaphorical meaning. So, with Shakespeare, we can't forget that that's important too, that that's the most important thing. Our job isn't just to read to find out what it says. Our job is to read to find out what it means, what the bigger picture is. So, I'm going to give you 3 steps for when you're reading a Shakespearean play, or a play by Shakespeare. 3 things that you can do to make sure that you're not only focused on the literal meaning, but you're focused on the deeper meaning. The first step, though, is just make sure you understand the literal meaning. I'm not saying that that's not important. That is important. You have to understand what he's trying to say. And even though he is writing in modern English, he is still writing in a different time. So his use of English is different from ours today. So yes, you do have to understand what he's saying. You can translate it into your own words. Now, does that mean you have to literally write everything out in your own words? No. Make sure you understand it. Use whatever tools you need to. You can use dictionaries, you can use online annotations, you can use the annotations in your book, you can use No Fear Shakespeare, whatever will help you understand the meaning, do that. But once that's done, you're not done. The second thing you should do is just analyze the specific scene you're reading as a scene. So what that means is forget about the larger picture, forget about the big themes and the overall, character arcs in the play. Just focus on what's happening in the moment and analyze those specific things. What is the purpose of what's happening? What is the language here? What types of tricks is Shakespeare using? What figurative language? What rhetorical devices? How is it written? And analyze what that means for the scene at hand. And then the third thing you do is then look at the bigger picture. Once you really understand the literal meaning of the scene, once you really understand the figurative meaning of the scene, then connect that scene to the larger themes of the whole play. And if you do those 3 things and get used to doing that, you will be able to read these plays extraordinarily well. Now, does this mean that you have to write it out every single time you read a scene? No. I will have you write it out for practice for now, but at a certain point it becomes second nature. You read to understand, then you read to understand the deeper meaning of the language, and then you read to understand the larger picture and its connection to the overall play. So let's take an example. This is a scene in Twelfth Night where Malvolio has been tricked into making a fool of himself in front of Olivia, the woman that he hopes to marry. Now, you can pause this and read the scene, but it would be better, I would just always start reading an important Shakespeare scene by seeing if there's a performance of it. So just watch the video in the links below, pause this now, watch the clips, see how the actors, how Nigel Hawthorne and Helena Bonham Carter act this scene, and then come back and look at the language. And that's always a great way to really understand the literal language too. So do that now. Now, once you've done that, now you can really work. So the first thing again, translate this scene into your own words. What is Malvolio saying to Olivia? What is she responding with? Translate only those lines that give you difficulty. Do you think you're going to have to translate some are born great, some achieve greatness, some have greatness thrust upon them? No, that's pretty self-explanatory. But when he says, not black in mind, though yellow in my legs, it did come to his hands, and command shall be executed, I think we do know the sweet Roman hand. Well, that's not as clear. That you should try and figure out what exactly does he mean by that. Now once you've done that, now let's focus on just this scene. So I'm using this example to really show you what I mean here. You want to almost treat this scene as though it's its own poem or its own short story. Think about what this is a little story about. It's a story about an older man who is trying to impress a younger woman and failing miserably. And we have to analyze it on that level first. And let's analyze how Shakespeare tells that story. Well, the first things that stand out to me is, why did he choose yellow stockings to cross-gartered, which means basically he's got tight ribbons tied around his knees? Why is he making Malvolio smile so much? I mean, these three things together require some thinking work from you. Shakespeare could have chosen anything for Malvolio to make a fool of himself with, but he chose these three things, which are really stand out to us. They're visual, they're funny, but they're utterly ridiculous. So why does he make Malvolio do them, besides just the fact that he needs Malvolio to make a fool of himself? Why make a fool of himself with these things? Next, analyze the character. What does it show us about Malvolio in this scene that he's willing to do these things? What does it show us that he's so persistent, that he's willing to be so bold with Olivia, who is his better, who is not his equal? Finally, what does it show us about Olivia? Look at how she speaks in this scene. Look at how she responds to him, particularly in this second column, where everything she cuts him off. Some are born great. Ha! Some achieve greatness. What sayest thou? And some have greatness thrust upon them. Heaven restore thee. This whole scene on the right column is just a series of interruptions, and those dashes should stand out to us as being important. Once we've answered these questions, we understand this small scene on its own, and we get to dig into the deeper meaning of this small moment, and that's extremely important. All of those small things, Olivia's responses, the yellow stockings, the cross-gartering, those things are important. But now that we understand the scene, we can go to the deeper meaning. Make connections between this moment and the larger themes of the whole play. Well, what are some things we notice off the bat? Well, in this scene, Olivia is having done to her what she does to Cesario, which is Cesario doesn't like her making advances on him. But here Malvolio is making advances on her, and she's not that comfortable, just as Cesario is never comfortable when Olivia does it. Why does Shakespeare draw this parallel? Because this is a big parallel between things happening in the overall play. So that's a larger issue. That's a question you want to answer. Then we have this theme of deception. Malvolio is being deceived into feeling this desire for Olivia. He's told that he can have her, but that's a lie. How does the deception that's done to him differ from the way that Viola is deceiving others? Because there's a lot of deceit going on in this play, a lot of lying, a lot of disguise, a lot of making things up. So how is this different, or is it different? And so we're thinking then now about this bigger theme of deception. And then notice these quotes, which are repeated multiple times in the play. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, some have greatness thrust upon them. I mean, those stand out so much. They're so quotable. They're clearly important, and they're clearly bigger than just this scene. So consider those quotes. What's the difference between what you're born to be, what you make yourself to be, and what you become as a result of something that happens to you that's not under your control? I mean, think about those three things. How does this relate to larger issues within the play? So when you look at that, this is just one scene. That's a lot that we can think about. Thinking about all of these big themes within the whole play, we're thinking about all these things in the specific moments, and we're thinking about the literal language. And this is what we do with Shakespeare. At any given scene, if I'm asking you to really read it and comprehend it, I'm asking you to do these three things. So tomorrow in class, you will do these three things. I want you to pick another important scene from the play. Don't answer my questions that I gave you in this lesson. I want you to pick your own scene. And one of the important things to do is come up with the questions you need to answer. So just as I was able to read the scene and find all of these questions here, you should be able to read your scene and list the questions you need to answer in order to do the work I've described here. What are the questions you have to answer about the specific language of the scene? What are the questions you have to answer about the larger connections being made in the scene? Write those down. You're going to submit them to me in the flipped lesson Google form. And I just want to see that you have your questions ready. And then tomorrow you're going to answer these questions, not in one word, not in one sentence, but in deep analytical thought paragraphs. Because this is how we understand. This is how we interpret the plays. We're not just reading them so that we can figure out what Shakespeare meant literally. We're reading them because there's a lot going on here. So I want you to have all period tomorrow to just sit with your scene and think about as many connections as you can make to the larger points of the play, but also as many ways that you can interpret that one scene as its own isolated moment in the play. So that's tomorrow. But the overall purpose of this is going forward. This process should just become part of you. You should do it like it's second nature. Always be thinking of these things. And if you do that, you'll be able to read any Shakespeare play well in the future, and you will read more Shakespeare plays.